Good evening and welcome to Phillips Mill Community Association's Art Talk. I'm Laura Womack. With me is executive producer Jen McHugh.
Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday.
Tonight we welcome artist Jane Ramsey, known for her watercolors of farms and barns in Bucks County. She grew up in Lumberville, Pennsylvania on the Delaware River. Her neighbors were artists and she carried a sketchbook wherever she went. Her love of the countryside was a family affair. Her family, when she was young, would pile in the car on a Sunday, get an ice cream, and go visit their father's favorite barns. Jane inherited the love of our countryside, and she's been painting it her whole life. Jane lives and paints on the Ulrich Farm in Bedminster Township. She owns Simon's Fine Art Framing and Gallery in Dublin. She also teaches art privately. She earned a BFA in graphic design from Cornish College in Seattle, and Jane is vice president of the Arts and Cultural Council of Bucks County. And I just want to add that Jane will also be leading a watercolor focus at Phillips Mill Community Association on June 26th, along with Beth Schoenlieber and Aida Burateri. Artists of all levels will have a 2-hour intensive on techniques, tips, demonstrations, and more. And this is part of Phillips Mill's effort to program more events to support our artists. It's coordinated by our own Dennis Riley. And Jane, we really appreciate you joining us for Art Talk and also for leading the watercolor focus. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to all of you for joining us at our new time on the fourth Wednesday at 7 p.m. Please join us with your questions in the Q&A, and Jen will put a link to the watercolor focus in the chat, or she might have already done that. So Jen, let's start right off, as we love to do, and take a look at some of Jane's artwork and see some of these beautiful Bucks County watercolors that Jane is known for. We'll take the second slide. There we go. Softness of Summer. Jane, this looks like a little niche field that you found somewhere on your many rambles.
That is off the back lane of the Ulrich Farm. And I always love the scene. I'm crazy. I've done quite a lot of studies of it. I just love the tree line rambling, tree line coming in from the left, and then the distant tree line in the back. And there's just always beautiful light in the evening. There's just a softness to the light, and the farmer had just cut the fields, so it gave me another view. Sometimes it's very tall and then I can't see further, but on this evening I was really happy when I saw that he had cut the field and decided to go out and capture that.
And some delicate sun left in the clouds there. You live on the Ulrich Farm, don't you, Jane? Tell us about that.
So I live in the tenant house, as it's called, and it was the original structure on the farm. It was a 1-story log cabin, and it's what they built to live in while they built the barn, and then they built the farmhouse later. And then over the years, it's been added on to. The second story went on, and they put a kitchen on in the back, I think turn of the century, like early 1900s. I started living there, let's see, it was 2019 is when I moved on to the farm, but I've been painting there and have gotten to know Mrs. Ulrich since 2016.
And there's a story about how that came to happen, that you living there, isn't there?
There is. The painting, I think that Jen has 2 paths. That was really the start of how I met her. It's a snowy scene.
I think that's near the end of our slideshow.
That's okay.
Tell us the story. Get that up.
Yeah, but anyway, well, actually, it's a scene that we talked about the Sunday drives. Okay, so this is one of the places my dad would always drive by, and he'd always just be so curious, like, why is it falling into disrepair? Why is the barn, what a beautiful barn, and he would always just want to take that detour to see that farm. So one day I was, thinking of him and thought, I'm going to go visit that place. And I went to go visit it, and was just so struck by the snow and the shadows. It was a really sunny day, and I decided to paint it. I was there the first day, and then the second day I came back and it was very cloudy. So I just worked on trees and things that weren't really affected by the light. And then the third day I came back to finish it, and the the whole time I was working on it, I kept wondering, like, what are all these footsteps and who's going there and why are there two paths and all that. And a gentleman stopped by because the police had called him to say that somebody's been hanging out down at the property for the last 3 days, them, just looking out for him. And so he came over to see me, and it was the grandson of the property. And so he, I asked him, what are the footsteps all about? And he said, oh, that's, my sister. She still comes to feed the feral cats that live in the house, that live on the property. So she trudges up those hills and feeds them every couple of days. So that was the answer to that. But through this, I posted on Facebook, and it turned out that somebody recognized it, shared it, that goes. And suddenly I was just getting all these calls from relatives saying, oh, it's my uncle's farm, or that's my grandfather's farm, all different family members. And one of them messaged me and said, oh, I could tell you such great stories about that place. And I was like, okay, you had me right there, like the word stories. And so she called me, we talked on the phone for hours, and she told me all about the farm. And then she asked, do you paint anywhere else nearby? And I said, well, I love all the farms and barns right in that area. And she said, well, have you ever seen the red barns off of 113 in Hill Road? And I said, oh yeah, I can see them from the road. I would love to go back there. She was, well, that's my Aunt Wally's farm. Just drive back there and tell her I sent you. So that's what I did. I drove back and knocked on the door one morning, and Mrs. Ulrich was in her bathrobe and came to the door. And at first she thought I wanted to paint her barn, as in like fix it up, to paint it. And I said, no, do a painting of it. And so I started painting there, and that's how I met her. And I was there every day. And she would come out to see what I was doing, or I would go in at night and say goodbye to her and show her what I worked on. And it was always led to a story, or, oh, that's so-and-so, or that was this year, or, it was just so great. And we just formed a wonderful friendship from that.
That's marvelous. So Jane, this took you 3 times to 3 plein air sessions to paint. Tell us about the process. I mean, there's a lot of detail there.
There is. It's about, I'm trying to think the finished size. I think it's like 12 by 18. I always start with a really good pencil sketch. So I spent a lot of time on the drawing and then laying in the clouds in the sky, and then just slowly building up. There's a lot of subtle glazes, especially on the ice with the shadows. And like I said, the second day I didn't do as much because the light wasn't there, and I really, really wanted those shadows. And so I just hoped that the next day would be sunny, and that it was, and I was able to go back and finish it. So not all paintings take that long, but this one did.
Because of the detail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Definitely.
We're going to have Jen, we're going to probably bounce a lot around as we usually do. Jen, let's go back to slide 2, the rambling fence line. And this is a sketch, Jane, and talk to us a little bit about your process and how you do a lot of sketching.
I do a lot of sketching. Really, the pencil is my first love, and I drew my whole life and for as long as I can remember. And so I really, really love working on drawings. I love the simplicity of the tool, the fact that this pencil and this blank piece of paper can turn into something like this. Is just thrills me. And I really loved exploring the tones and shading and the quality of line. It's just a lot of fun, and it's informative too. It's like I'm observing and I'm getting to know the subject matter. And sometimes I might decide in the middle of this drawing, like, wow, this would be a really interesting painting. I'm going to come back and paint this. And so that drawing informs the painting. And when I do go back to do the painting, it's almost like I'm seeing an old friend again, like I'm familiar, like I know the lean of the post, and I know the tilt of this, and I know I understand it better from the drawing. This is the same place that the softness of summer was done in. It's just pulled a little more to the left. And it's different time of year when the grasses and the brush are not up so high as to hide the fence line.
Right. All right, let's take a look at the next slide 3, family table. And this really, I think, symbolizes, Jane, the fact that you're not just painting landscapes, you're painting a way of life.
Yeah, this is on Jack's farm. And Jack is a farmer that I got to know through Laura, because Jack learned how to farm on the Ulrich farm as a young boy. And he's got just an incredible story of being an 11-year-old kid in the city who just announces to his parents one day that he wants to be a farmer. Not having ever been on a farm or worked on a farm or been around farmers, he just decided that's what he wanted to be. And this is his farm. And I just love, well, this tree is no longer standing, sadly, the spring storms took it down, but I love the setting. And, you know, when you come to the farm, the trees there, the table, Tish, his wife, like lovingly cleans every piece of fruit or vegetable before it goes out to the farm stand. There's a little bucket there with a rag, and she, you know, wipes everything down so that there's no mud on the tomatoes. And I just love the whole feel of it and the story, and the fields are out beyond that she picks at, brings the produce in. And that painting I was working on, and then the name comes from, I've been there on the farm, and I would be drawing and painting, and I would say, well, I'll see you later. I'm going to leave now. I'm going to stop at the stand on the way out and get something for dinner. And the one day Jack said to me, no, you have to go to the family table. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, the family table, the table under the tree. That's where you go and get your tomatoes and your corn and whatever you want. You take it home. And he goes, I said, oh my gosh. He goes, yeah, that's for family members. That's for friends who are like family. And there was just something about that statement that I just felt so welcomed. And, you know, because I'm always there, and I show up at any time, and they never mind. And they're said about their farming, and I just like, I'm going to sketch this today, or I'm going to do this today. And, you know, they really don't mind. So it just was a lovely phrase to tell me that.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful story. We have a question. I think we've got one in the chat, and we've got one in the Q&A. We'll take them both. And for the rest of you, please do share your questions as your opportunity to talk to Jane Ramsey, at least until she's at the mill on the 26th.
I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be neat.
I am too. So, okay, Jen, what is our question?
We have a question from Barbara, and I think this is what it says. So correct me if I'm wrong, Barbara, but there's typos, which I do all the time. How do you keep the water warm so that you can add it to the pigment?
Is she referring to like wintertime painting?
I think so.
Probably,
I
yeah.
think so.
Yeah, wintertime is challenging. So I've got to be in the sun. You know, the paper's got to be in the sun, the palette's got to be in the sun, because that does help. Also the time of day, I can't get out as early to paint, and I can't stay as late to paint, because by 4 o'clock, the sun starts to dip and then the temperature drops. So I try to go in the middle. And then I have all kinds of like clever, it's like plein air brings out the MacGyver in you, like you have to come up with all kinds of things. And so one of my tricks is I use the hood of my car. Because if you've driven somewhere and then you know, even just a 20-minute drive, the hood of your car will stay warm about 30 minutes or so, even longer if you've been driving a long time. And so sometimes I'll literally put my palette on the hood of the car, put my paper on the hood of the car, and tape it to the car hood and the water, and it will keep it from freezing. Or the other thing I use often is a little alcohol in your water will keep it from freezing, like little vodka or whatever. The other thing I use is those insoles that go in your boots to keep your toe, I think they're called toe warmers, but they're sticky, so that you peel them off and put them in your shoe. I peel them off and I put them under my palette, and it keeps my palette warm. So, and you're not going to be able to paint as big. You know, you can't be ambitious and say, well, I'm going to do a 20 by 30 today when it's 32 degrees out. It just isn't going to happen. You got to paint smaller. I might do just a color study. I might do a sketch and just put a little bit of color in here and there and make notes, make color notes, so that I could go back and finish it in the studio. So you have to work with all of those things.
Right. All right. And we've got another question in the chat or in the Q&A before we go forward.
Sure. This is from Jim Feld, a loyal viewer. He said, Jane, thanks for your past help with my watercolor framing advice. So my question is, if one of my watercolors is hopefully accepted at Phillips Mill to be in a plastic sleeve, how do you keep the moisture out so it is not destroyed?
He's probably talking about a portfolio piece where they're wrapped in plastic.
Right.
The biggest thing is to not have the plastic touch the art. So to have a mat around it, a mat board will keep the plastic from touching the actual painting. That helps. because that's, you know, you don't want moisture to get trapped between the plastic and be touching right on the watercolor.
Right. And we are asking for a thicker mill plastic this year because we had a lot of damage, not a lot of damage, but the plastic was coming off last year. So the prospectus should be out very soon.
Yeah, it really should be sealed, like in and out, like I know some people do the plastic and then you wrap it around the edges and just tape it from behind, but then it's really not encapsulated. So that's, you know, that also would allow moisture to get in.
That's right. And people flip through quite a bit. So
yeah,
we do try to, you know, keep an eye on that, but it's challenging. All right, let's move forward with some artwork. I don't see many portraits, Jane, but we've got a lovely picture of Jack, who's I think whose tomato family table we were looking at before.
Yeah, this is on the Ulrich Farm. This is the back soybean fields, and I saw him out there and, you know, waved at him, and then he got off out of the combine and came to talk with me. I did this portrait sneakily kind of with my iPhone, shooting a movie the whole time he was talking to me, because Jack was very shy and he won't sit for me. And he's always like, when he saw this picture in the gallery, he goes, "What are you doing trying to scare the customers away?" You know, like he just doesn't want to, you know, so I just would sort of be sitting there, you know, talking to him, just sort of like this, casually holding my phone while it was on video. And then I was able to like work from some stills and then rest from memory, you know, how, you know, what I think of him and how I feel about him.
And how did he feel about the results?
Oh, he was so surprised. I brought I had it scanned and I had a G-clay made at Graphic Imaging, and I wrapped it all up and I brought it to his house and I said, "I have something new to show you." And he just was like, "What? You know, how did you do that? You know, when?" And then I confessed. I said, "Well, you know, when I'm standing there holding my phone." And part of the reason I'm videoing is he's so full of stories, and he's so full of like just great stories of early farming in Bedminster. And I feel like I'm gonna like not be able to retain it all and remember all the details he tells me. So just to have even the video is great, because I can, you know, go back and listen to it if I wanted to remember something that he said. So
And Jane, this is a remarkable portrait. I mean, I think of you as doing landscapes. I don't see a lot of portraits from you. Perhaps I've missed them. And
no,
yet,
I don't do a lot.
Here you are, extremely capable of that. Do you like doing portraits?
I do. I think I like doing portraits of people that mean something to me. So maybe that's why this is, you know, definitely something I wanted to do. I really wanted to capture Jack and how I feel about him. And he's like the biggest teddy bear. He's just always up, and nothing gets him down. And it can be the worst, you know, when he was standing there telling me, he was telling me how he was barely breaking even that season, that between the cost of, you know, fuel and seed and fertilizer, he was going to be lucky if he broke even. But yet he's still chuckling and going, "But you know, I love it and I wouldn't do anything different." And so he's just a joy to be around. And
I think farmers, my grandfather was a farmer, and it's a very particular culture. It's not a malingering type culture. So but you don't think of yourself as a documentarian, Jane. You're not trying to record the history or Bucks County landscape. You're just painting what you love.
Yeah. And in essence, it is documenting it, but it wasn't my first goal. My first goal was just to really capture the place that I've come to love, you know, the Ulrich Farm, and then the farmers like Jack, who I've met through that, and just really wanting to capture it and just celebrate them. You know, I think it's been a thrill for me to like bring things in to show Laura and bring her such joy about her farm and all her life that she's devoted there. And she just really enjoys the art. And sometimes she'll say, "I didn't even see that before," or "How did you see that?" Or, you know, "I've been by that side of the barn all this time and never noticed that," or something. So that's the thrill.
Right. All right, next up, I think we have the crabapple, which is so evocative of spring. And here it is out in plein air. It's just so evocative of spring. It has a wildness. Tell us about this painting, Jane.
These are the old crabapple trees on the farm, and I've been painting them since I met Laura. before I lived on the farm, I would get like a phone call like at 7 o'clock in the morning. Hurry, get over, it's blooming. It's blooming today. You must drop everything you're doing and get here. Because the blossoms don't last long. And if we have, this year was wonderful because we had the cooler weather, right? And the cooler nights. So the blossoms lasted about 4 days versus other years, you know, we get like a super hot sweltering day and that's the end of them, or we get a bunch of rain and then they all just drop off. So this year seemed especially celebratory because it was just so lush and they lasted so long. I had 3 days that I could do. I did multiple paintings and drawings that over those 3 days of this tree, and this one I was really happy with.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So it seems like, again, there's a real feeling for the tree here. It's my brain tends to be very analytical and I try to deconstruct it, and yet I don't think you can really on this because it's the painting itself is very emotional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this tree. I love the way it just arches over the rambling fence line, and the yellow flowers in the front field are like a wild lily that pop up right about the same time that the tree blooms, and they only last about the same time too. And when they all come together, it's really celebratory. You know, it's just a great event.
So I think as a non-artist, the freedom of these strokes, I'm guessing that you can achieve that freedom once you've put a lot of time in your sketchbook and painting and drawing. I don't think this is something you come to quickly. Am I wrong?
No, not at all. And especially like this, I had done like several drawings of that tree over the course of the day, you know, 3 days, and then did this painting. So I felt like I had gotten finally to understand the limbs and the way the boughs drape there. And yeah, it just, yeah. Oh, I forgot that I sent you. Yeah, that's one of the drawings.
Thanks,
So,
Jen. Yeah.
yeah. So it just builds a familiarity, and it just allows me also to just really hone in and think about what it is I really want to focus on, you know. And in doing that sketch, I realized I really wasn't so concerned with the left of the tree, left side. I really love the right side. I really love the part that's just rambling and the bough is so heavy and just leaning over the fence line. That's the view I wanted to focus on.
It's reaching. So I think your sketches are beautiful in and of themselves, Jane.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are those ever available, or are you strict?
No, they are. I never have them available in my sketchbook. I keep that intact. I don't take any pages out of it, but I do sketches. I have a lot of graphite work here at the gallery that is framed and for sale. And like that tree line sketch that you just showed, that is a loose sketch, and that is framed and for sale.
Beautiful. All right, let's look at Slipping into Dark, I think is next. Oh, nope, I skipped.
Cider House.
Cider House. This is great. I mean, this is a beautiful piece. Your shading is so delicate, Jane.
Thank you. I think so much of nature and these structures are delicate. You know, they're really rugged and strong, but they have these really delicate qualities. This is the Cider House at Penn, Vermont Farms, which is right down the road from Laura's farm, and they're all connected. And I've known Ken and Judy for years, and I've been wanting to come into the Cider House and watch them make the cider for a couple of years, and I finally got the opportunity to be there. I thought I would go in and paint, you know, I took all my gear and everything, but I realized very quickly I didn't want to be in their way. And it's a really messy operation. There's apple juice everywhere. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do sketches. So I did quick sketches, and then I came back to the studio and worked on this large drawing. I think this is 24 by 30, 36. So it's a big drawing. But I just loved those heavy claws that they use to kind of sandwich between the layers to do the pressing of the apples, and just the beautiful brick, and just the way the light was streaming in from behind me. It was just something I wanted to capture. And Ken up there on a stool, you know, it's so hard. It's such hard work. After I watched the whole thing, I said, you should never allow anyone to gulp your cider. We have to sip it, like, because it's just so much work goes into it. It's just a labor of love. And they keep telling me every year is going to be the last year because, you know, they're getting up in age and it's a really physical job to do that.
So this is 22, but the season is in the fall, isn't it? When are they pressing?
Yeah, this was in the fall that they were making in October. And this is, Ken was telling me, this is one of the oldest cider houses in Pennsylvania. It's been in constant operation since like 1934. So it's just got, you know, filled with history and the mechanisms and all the, you know, it's got newer stuff that's been added to it, newer technology and all that, but it's still got a lot of the old stuff. It's powered by the engine of a tractor that has a belt pulley that runs it. I mean, it's just fascinating, the whole thing.
That's wonderful. Okay, next up, I believe, is Slipping into Dark. And this is just, I think we've all been to this place, Jane.
Oh, thanks. This was on the way home about a month ago. This is fairly new. And we had a cold front moving in, and that clash of the two. And I was driving by these fields near the Ulrich Farm that I always love to like drive as slow as possible and still look at them, and saw that cloud formation, and just the way it was, just the darkness just seemed to be, you know, just sucking into the whole view of the field and taking it over. And I thought, oh, I just wish I could pull over right now and paint that or draw it, but it really wasn't feasible. It was getting dark quickly. And so the next morning I came into the studio and worked on that piece from memory. So it was kind of like a really fun, I've not done that very much. And it was really, really fun to do, but I think it's built upon so much observation, so much sketching in the field, so much sketching of grasses and trees and scrubby brush and being out in darkness and being out in sunset and seeing what it looks like and what the light looks like and what it feels like. So it's from a lot of observation.
So I'm not even quite sure how to ask this question, Jane, but all of these observations, then you're able, those are like, I think you call it memory banking.
Yes.
Well, first of all, tell us what you mean by memory banking.
Because when you're drawing, especially, and I think so too when you're painting, but maybe for me more so when I'm drawing, I'm just really storing and building that visual imagery in my head of what I'm seeing. And I call it visual banking because I'm going to retain it and I'm going to remember it and I'm going to think about it. So the next time I'm approaching, say, finishing a plein air piece in the studio, I don't rely on the photograph from that session. I rely more on what did it feel like and what did those branches look like in the dim light, and how far could you really see, and trees that are 30 feet back just are little blurs, and so just that relying on those visuals that I've banked from the earlier experiences.
And when you're driving by, you have all of these observations to draw from, but are you saying like, I see that the skeleton of that tree, it's very dark and it branches off like this, and are you memorizing elements? Are you making mental, like in my mind, I'm very word oriented. Are you keeping words that are tracking the details, or how do you recall?
Question. I think it would depend, first of all, how fast, how much you can slow down. There's times where I'm like, if I'm on the back roads like Hill Road, I could literally just stop. There's nobody around. It's not a traveled road in the evening, and I could literally just pull over. This was off of 113, so not exactly able to do that. But in this case, I think what I really intended to capture in my head was the sky. I knew that I could figure out the tree line in the fields because I've seen those a lot, but I really wanted to remember the sky, and I really wanted to remember the cloud formations and the shapes and the angle at which the light was coming. So that's what I
was it like a snapshot in your mind? Or
yeah, it's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like it's like a snap. And sometimes it's like that with, I'm on the farm and I see something, I'm like, oh, I want to paint that. And then I'll think about it in my head, and I'll actually envision what I think it's going to look like. And then it may not come out like that, but I do have an intent. I do have a plan or a thought.
All right. And I'm just last question on this one, because I'm so fascinated. I think this is one of the hardest things to get across, because really it's abstract lines when you break it down to the elements. But then when you put it all together, Jane, with your experience and your skills, it becomes something. So how do you create those clouds? Because I think clouds are very difficult.
Yeah, this was a combination of charcoal, powdered graphite, which is like loose, like almost like face powder, that I applied with a brush, and then also worked it in with my fingers. And then it needed eraser, lifting and pulling, subtracting some of it, like those little white highlights over to the far right, those were lifted with an eraser. So it's really a combination. It was not a lot of pencil up in the sky. It was more the charcoal stick and the powdered graphite and rubbing, with hand or with brush.
So knowing your materials as well. Jen, I think we have a question in the Q&A, and we're looking forward to all of your questions in the audience.
Yes, we have a question from Carol Gilbert. Jane, beautiful sketches. I would like to know what type of paper you use for your pencil sketches, as well as does your paper have a tooth or texture to it? Also, do you have a preference for your drawing pencils? Thank you.
Good questions. So I really love, for watercolors, I work on Fabriano paper. I love that. For my drawings, I like working on printmaking paper. So I use a printmaking paper called Arnhem, Arnham. I'm so sorry if I got that misspelling wrong. It's from Holland. And I also have used BFK Reeves printmaking paper, but I really like the Arnhem paper the best. So it has a little, first of all, it has a sturdiness to it because it's printmaking paper, so it's not as fragile. It's thicker, and I can get it out in the field and roll it and unroll it and work with it. It also has a tooth to it, a little, I think because of the printmaking nature that it was meant to grab ink, and in this case, it's grabbing dry medium. And it can take a lot of work on it. Like I can rub and pull and lift and work on it without it deteriorating, without it starting to fray or break down. So that's why I like using that paper.
All right, good to know. And I think you'll have more tips and demonstrations at the watercolor focus.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, next up.
Oh, she asked about pencils too. So probably my favorite pencil's a 4B, and then I will go up as high as a 9B or an 11B for super soft lead for drawings, because I just love that it's so soft and I can press really hard and get good darks, but lift up, and there's just a way that it skips across the paper when it's a nice soft lead. It just has a nice feel. Do
you ever use a hard pencil?
No, hardly ever.
Yeah. And does the pencil disappear under the watercolor?
It does and it doesn't. It's in super transparent applications of the watercolor. You see the pencil. In watercolor, I might be, depending on the scene, like for instance, that snow scene, the two paths, I probably used a 2B or a, in the snowy areas, just because if you're using something like a 4B or 6B, the watercolor is going to pick up that graphite and move it into the wash area and discolor it or have it gray slightly. So if I know the painting is going to have whites that I want to preserve or lights, I'll use a harder lead. But yeah, I don't try to hide the pencil. I feel like my drawings are just, the drawing part of it is integral to the paint, in the painting,
right.
Yeah, it's part of it.
All right, well, let's take a look at your setup. Slide 10, I believe it is. It is have wagon can travel.
Yes, I love my wagon.
And your companion here.
Yep.
Tell us who this is.
That's Ben, and he's a rescue, and we've had him he's 13, so we've had him since he was 4. And he's just so devoted and so loyal. He's such a good dog. He just sticks around. I never have to have him on a leash. And he may dart off after a deer or something, but he comes right back. But I love the wagon just because it's rough terrain trying to go out into the farm fields. There's big dips and divots where the tractor's gone through in the mud, and it just frees me up to not have to hold on to so much stuff. I can take a bunch of stuff out with me, because sometimes I want to have a variety of things out there, because I might go out intending that I'm going to paint and then say, no, I'm just going to sketch today. And so I want to have the materials there.
Right. And let's take a look at the next one. We've got a
Oh yeah, and there's the cardboard.
Sorry.
I said, there's the cardboard in the picture. I didn't even
Yeah,
think
to
that was
keep them
there.
warm. Yeah.
Yeah, so Ben has a nice place to sit when it's
And okay, next up, there we go. This is sort of half sketch, half watercolor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's out of my sketchbook, and I like to call these like color notes. They're not really finished paintings, but they're a drawing, and they are quick splashes of color to capture what I'm seeing and the colors I'm seeing in the field. Because I think even the photograph there is like a perfect point, that the photo of the scene behind it doesn't nearly convey the oranges and golds that were happening in that sunshine. So I really like having my sketchbook to refer to for color reference.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say, it's very interesting to see, the place you're painting in the photograph versus the sketch. And I think the next slide has a more finished one. So how much license do you take, Jane, with the environment that you're painting? I think you move some trees as well as change the color. Added some.
Yeah, I might move the trees a little bit out of the way, or edit, not do every tree, because it's really what I was trying to do there was just capture that hay wagon and the ruddy path going out into the field with it. The color's pretty much like what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling, there. I don't really take too many liberties with that. I just try to capture the emotion, I think. So maybe there's some play in that certain colors are heightened more because I'm responding to them that way.
All right. And Jen, let's skip ahead to slide 14. Well, this is beautiful, but we do have a lot to get through. I just think this is such a beautiful sketchbook. I'm envious of your sketchbook, Jane. As somebody who can't draw, I always thought it would be nice to have a sketchbook that had pretty pictures in it.
I love my sketchbooks, and I have like 4 or 5 that are going all at the same time. This is one that I finished already, but it was one that I said I was only going to do black and white in it, only pencil, no watercolor. It's not a watercolor paper. I think it was made by Canson, and it has a really beautiful smooth paper. And then I've got watercolor sketchbooks, and I've got one in my car. So if I'm, stuck somewhere or see something, I can do it. So I have multiple sketchbooks going on it at a time, just so I can read. And this is the old metal shop, and Mrs. Ulrich's husband wanted to leave farming. He really was an artist at heart, and he really wanted to do metal work, and he really wanted to make sculptures and ornamental ironwork. And he finally got his chance to do that, and he had his metal shop on the farm there. And right now it's just sort of like, I don't know, it's just there, and it's filled with all his stuff still, as if he just like walked away. The tools are still spread out on the table inside. It's kind of falling into disrepair. And usually there's just in the front, there's just a pile of old metal, scrap metal that he was collecting. But that day in the snow, with that blanket of snow just sort of covering it, and it all disappeared. And it was just, my focus now could just be on this workshop. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, I have to sketch this today, because it captures sort of, for me, like the silent feeling of this time period that's gone. And the snow just kind of covered all the clutter or whatever in the foreground, and just really allowed me to have the focus. I mean, even that little metal sign on the front that he made his own little business name and it just sits there dangling in the wind. When the wind's blowing, you hear this little clank, clank, clank as it hits the side of the blocks. It's just kind of neat. I just wanted to capture it.
It's very evocative sketch. Okay, we have a question about your sketchbooks.
Yes, Karen would like to know, which sketchbook would you recommend for watercolor sketching?
Well, first of all, there's so many out there. of course, there's the, what is this one? The Moleskine makes one. You know, I tell people, like, make sure you get it the size that you'll easily carry it around and make it useful in your life. So don't get a big one if you're not gonna, you know, do that. I mean, it's easier. So Moleskine makes one. My other favorite one is called, I think it's called a watercolor journal, actually. It's not even called a sketchbook. And it is from Global Arts Materials. I got this at Phoenix Art Supply, but I love it. It has a cloth cover and the paper is just really beautiful. It's like a really, I'm not as fond anymore of the other watercolor books with the paper, but the quality of the paper in this global one is really lovely. And it's got this nice little strap that you can, you know, enclose it. And it's also got this sweet little pocket in the back so you can put field treasures like a leaf you found or something that I can keep with it. But they're nice. So I enjoy those two brands.
So Jane, why watercolor as opposed to oil or something else?
I've always loved watercolor. I studied, you know, at Cornish, and my degree was in graphic design with a minor in illustration. And we used a lot of watercolor in our illustration classes, and I just fell in love with it. I love the immediacy of it. I think one of the things I really love about it is the way it works with a pencil drawing. You know, it just seemed like a natural evolution to go from doing drawings to then doing drawings with color added, where you can't really do that, you know, with oils or acrylics, because it would cover the pencil completely. I really love the spontaneity of it. I like the ease of it. I love the fact that I'm not working with solvents and I can be out in a farm field and dump my water out without having to worry about, you know, doing, you know, would never do that with a solvent. So I do like that, but I've just always loved it. And I've worked in oils and acrylics, and someday I might want to go back and work in them again. For now, I just have always loved watercolors.
And so help me understand, you know, when I first encountered watercolors, I thought that it was about the wash. And yet there are watercolors, you do sort of a combination, but there are watercolorists who do a very fine and very exacting. You know, and I've heard a watercolor artist recently refer to how precise watercolor is, which really surprised me because I think of it as the wash and almost impressionistic.
And it is all that. You know, I think it is so versatile in that. And you can work like wet into wet paper and get great spreads and bleeds and, you know, that beautiful softness that watercolor does. And then you can paint more controlled, more pigment, less water, smaller brush, and do really defined areas. So I love the full range of it.
Is there something it's supposed to be? I know we don't do supposed to much anymore, but is there traditionally?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it should just be, you know, the medium, and you use it in the way that you think it tells the story the best or expresses the story the best. I have watercolors that are a lot tighter, but I have watercolors that are looser. And I think they're always with the intent of what am I trying to say and what's the story. And some of it too might be what's the timing. You know, obviously my sketchbook, it's a lot simpler and quicker because I'm not spending 3 hours on a sketch in my sketchbook. I'm spending maybe an hour, more like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just trying to get a quick sketch in.
So we have another technical question. We'll take that, and then I think let's look at a few more sketch and painting combinations.
Jim wants to know, do you set your pencil or graphite with anything so the watercolor doesn't blend it out?
No, I don't. You mean like a fixative or something before I would put watercolor on it? No.
Exactly. Nope.
No.
Does it run, or do you no?
Yeah, I mean, just depends. Sometimes the pencil can migrate. Obviously, if it's super heavy shaded and then I'm going to go paint on top of it, that's going to lift a lot of graphite, carry it away. So I don't do, my watercolor drawings don't start with a lot of shading. They're just line.
Okay.
You know, line only. And I'm saying form with color.
Okay. All right. And Barbara, we'll sneak Barbara's question in before we go back to the slides, Jen.
Yes, Barbara wants to know which watercolor artist inspires you.
Oh my gosh. I love Sargent's watercolors. You know, they're incredible. Hopper. I know Wyeth is not, although his watercolors, people are not as familiar with them, but his watercolors are incredible. He did a lot of very loose, washy, splashy watercolor studies before he does the tightly rendered temperas that everyone thinks of him, you know, being attributed to. His watercolors are incredible.
All right, well, good. Thanks for those are some great choices there, Jane. Jen, let's look at a sketch, the soybean sketch before we see the painting itself. All right. I think this, you know, as a sketch, this is beautiful in its own right.
Thank you. This is pencil and then liquid charcoal, which Schmick, he makes it, they have like 3 different kinds. The charcoal's made from like 3 different sources. And this is the charcoal, I believe it's made from the cherry pits that are like charcoal cherry pits. So it has this has a reddish hue to it, a little bit brownish, and I really love it. I was experimenting with it. I just gotten it and thought, well, it'll be fun to try it. The nice thing about it is, you know, I love that end of evening time for sketching and painting, but you don't have a lot of time. You've got maybe 30 minutes because the light's just about going to go. So it affords you to lay in large areas of value like the tree line really quickly with a brush, where if you were trying to build that up with a pencil, you know, you would be there and the light would be gone. So it's super great for like trying to lay in large tonal areas really quickly. And I'm obsessed with the soybean fields. I've spent years painting and sketching and drawing out there with them. I love just this field is so familiar to me from having done it for so many times. And I love the difference as the plants grow that change and how they interact with the light.
All right, now let's take a look at 19, which is also a sketch, but in color. And this is just such a different feel.
Yeah. This was just a watercolor, call this a watercolor sketch because it's really not super tight to me. You know, like I edited a lot, but also even in rendering the trees, I'm just really trying to get that brush stroke and just quickly convey the branches because of time. You know, that I saw that sky with those purple clouds and, you know, the sun was setting and I just really wanted to capture it quickly. This is on an elongated sketchbook that I have that I just love from Legion paper. It's like 14 inches by 5 or something. It's a really fun format to use and it allows me just to, you know, not take up time with like setting up a board and putting my watercolor paper down and taping it down and all that. I can just do it right on a watercolor sketchbook or a sketch pad, I should say.
All right, and then 18, we have the finished artwork.
Oh yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
how big is this, Jane? Tell us about it.
This one is, I think about, I want to say it was like 17 by 11. And this was right. So I love the changes. I feel like this is after the soybeans have ripened and the leaves have fallen off. And then all you're left with is the stalks and the pods, which get harvested. And generally, you know, you have to wait until the moisture levels are down. So Jack will come and measure the moisture levels and say, no, can't harvest today. So I was so happy because it was moist for a long time. So they were like this for a couple of weeks and I got to paint them. And they just take on a different feel, you know, from the leafy green plants that they are. They're suddenly these just, and they make this incredible like rustling sound in the wind because they're dried, you know, so the stalks and those pods are like little rattles almost on it. So I can hear, like, I can still hear that when I look at that painting. And just a different time of year with the tree line, you know, starting to lose leaves. And I just love the softness of how it just becomes almost like, to me, almost like a body of water or a body of something, you know, it's not individual stalks. I see it as this entire field or this entire body of color. So you just never tire of it. At least I don't, because it changes with the time of year and with the plant and how it grows.
Right. All right. Now we've got the, let's see, Evening Visitors. And I think this was an epic production, which if I may say so. Jen, let's first get to Dennis's question, or let's take a look at it while we have Dennis's questions up.
Dennis wants to know, what's the largest watercolor you have done, Jane?
This, this is the one. So this was about 6 feet wide and 36 or 40, like 42 inches high. And this
Which is massive.
It is. I bought the paper. You buy it in the roll, you know, so it's on a large roll, so you can make it as long as you want. I have a wonderful artist friend, Elisa Gore from New York City, who paints these large watercolors with pastel. And I've always been enamored of the format, the size. Well, I'm enamored of the work, but just the idea of how liberating it is to paint something so big. And after working on these soybean field studies for a couple of seasons, 2 years, I just kept thinking, gosh, I would love to create a real sense of place. I'd love it to be life-size. I'd love it to feel like it feels like when I'm sitting by the fields in the evening, like I was doing every evening that whole summer. And so I set about to create this and worked on it in the studio during the winter. And I call it Evening Visitors for the deer that are in the tree line. You know,
We
they
have
come out,
detail of that.
yeah, they come out every evening and would watch me. And in the beginning, when the soybeans are really low, they're scared of me and they run off, or they see Ben. But by the time the soybeans are, you know, 3 feet high, Ben's hiding underneath them and they don't see him, and then they would stay, and they would eventually like start to really trust me and get up even closer. But I just loved how they look. There's just such a shimmer to the soybean fields in the late summer. And, you know, the leaves go from green to this gold to oranges. It's just incredible. And again, like from direct observation, you know, I was always so curious, why are they so rimmed and light? And then one day I was like looking, I was like down on my knees, like and I'm like noticing every leaf has got little hairs all around the edges of it, you know, so it's like these little light refractors that line all these leaves. So when that low sun sets and that light just casts across the top, you know, they come alive. And so I wanted to create that. And I also was enamored of that tangled structure of the plants underneath. You see like this beautiful top that's soft and velvety, and then you look underneath and these plants are just all like intertwined, like their stems and their structure. They hold each other up, you know, I was, you know, intrigued with that, and I wanted to convey that. I wanted to, you know, create that sense of place for somebody.
Yeah. So it must be incredible to see that at 6 feet wide. Do you still have that, Jane, or is it?
I don't. That's in a collection with a collector, and she's got the perfect spot for it. And she said she sits and she feels like she's in the, like by the field, which thrills me because that's what I wanted. I wanted someone to feel like they're sitting there.
And will you do another that size?
Yeah, I have another one in the works right now.
All right, that's fine. I'd love to see that when you finished your another epic painting. We just have a few minutes left, and we've got a couple more questions coming in. I want to get to that, but people must hear, Jane, about how you physically accomplished. If you could give us a brief outline. You went and got a special car that you measured out.
Oh, I went and got a hollow core door at Home Depot. And then I told the guy, I'll be right back. And I took it outside and shoved it in my car, and then measured where the hatch would start to fold down, and then took it back at the store and he cut it down for me. And I'm sure they were just like, and then I had to get a new car, and the car dealer, actually, the salesman was wonderful. He turned out he was an art collector, and he was very avid art collector of Bucks County art. And I'm telling him how, you know, I've got to be able to get a 6-foot hollow core door in the back. So we're measuring with a measuring tape. Like, who cares if it had power steering or moonroof or any of that stuff? Like, all I cared about was, can I get a door in the back of the car and get my gear in there? And will the hatchback stay up high enough so I can be under it to paint? And
so that door sticking out of the back of your hatchback is your easel.
Yes.
I've got an image. Okay, let's quickly take these last couple of questions before our time is up. Jen?
Okay, Bill wants to know, tell us about your watercolor palette. Pans, tube?
Tube. And mostly Daniel Smith and some Holbein, or Holbein, I'm not sure I'm saying that right.
All right, great. Well, that was very efficient, Jane. I'm
That was
impressed.
quick. And Karen wants to know, do you ever use masking fluid?
Never.
Why
Never.
not?
I don't like it. I mean, in college, I remember in art school, we had to use it. But I thought, I just don't want to be bothered. I just retain my whites. I just try to be careful and keep my whites going and, protect them. And even if you do get some color in paper, you can lift it. It's much more forgiving than people, realize. It's not as final.
So the masking fluid, I'm assuming, is like a
So
resist.
if you paint it on like a resist, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's take a look. We are out of time, but I'd love for you to talk to us about what you have planned for the Phillips Mill crowd on the 26th of June. Just give us an outline of what that's about, Jane, and we'll look at we'll look at Beth Schoenlieber and Aida Bierteri's work while you're doing that.
Okay, perfect. So we really want this to be an informal get together. People that are either interested in watercolor or already work in watercolor or like watercolor paintings or like collecting watercolor paintings. And it'll really be we really see it as an open dialogue of the three of us talking about our love for the medium and how we use it. And then we're going to have breakout sessions at tables where we'll share with you our palettes, our brushes, our paints, our paper, all the kinds of things that we like to use so that you can actually see them and ask questions about it, try it out. I know Aida's really excited about bringing her Sumi ink, and she's got some really cool Japanese brushes that she uses. So, and we really want to design it so it's really informal and yet celebrates watercolor, and you can have hands-on in terms of seeing things and looking at things. And then we'll rendezvous back again for a group Q&A session, and that's pretty much it. It's 2 hours, and we just wanted to have it be as informal as possible so that you can feel comfortable to come and ask questions. And
we're so grateful to you for doing this. And you can see that Aida Bierteri, her work is a little bit more abstract, very different subject matter. And Beth had the ivy, which is, I think, a very precise form of watercolor. So it's a range of people who are talking about.
Yes, exactly. And that was intentional. I really wanted to bring in two people that, first of all, their work I really admire. And it's so different. And just to show the diversity of the medium, that there's so much you can do with watercolor. There's not just one way.
Well, Jane, this was wonderful to hear your stories about Bucks County plein air watercolor painting. Thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Thank you, everyone, for listening and being here.
And thank you also for leading this workshop on June 26th at Phillips Mill. You can go to phillipsmill.org to register for that. June 26th, as I say, there's a link in the chat and on the website. That's being organized by our own Dennis Riley, who is ArtTalk show producer. He conceived of that idea and put it together with Jane, and he's sponsoring a raffle as well. On the next Art Talk on June 22nd, also a Wednesday at 7 p.m., we'll look back at the work of Catherine Renninger with independent curator Liz Sheehan, who put together a show on Renninger's work at Michener Art Museum. We're very excited about that show. Catherine Renninger was an important artist in the mid-20th century, and her work has a unique perspective. In addition to Liz Sheehan, we're excited to have Sally Henriquez, Renninger's daughter and a lifelong member of Phillips Mill. Thank you to executive producer Jen McHugh. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to content producer Jean Mahitch. I'm Laura Womack, and all of you have a very good night.